Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'll be talking about respiratory movements from the anatomical point of view. What all processes are involved in the case of respiration from an anatomical point of view. We'll be talking about the chest wall movements and how and why chest wall is important for respiration. I will not be going into the physiological aspects at all, just a little bit in the clinical aspect I might consider it, but nothing as such. A brief disclaimer that the medical knowledge is ever evolving and ever changing, so what we know today will definitely change tomorrow. So let's begin with it. So let's go. So the thing is, the topic is respiratory movements. Okay, so firstly about introduction. What is respiration? A habit of using introduction or the definition with greens. Respiration is a process of, or better to say, cyclic process of inspiration and expiration, in which inspiration is active whereas expiration is passive. So since it is active, it lasts for approximately 1 second. Whereas the passive expiration, it lasts for around 3 seconds. Now we'll have a brief account of the respiratory rates in various age groups. In neonate it is 50 to 60. In an infant, 40 to 50. I'm talking about breaths per minute. In child, it is 25 to 30. In adult, 16 to 20. In elderly, it is 14 to 16. Why there is huge amount of this variation? So in children, the basically as you can see that when the child is growing from neonate to adult, the surface area of the lungs is increasing and hence it can exchange more amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide. But when the child is having a small lung, small surface area, and in one breath it can not exchange that much amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide the way an adult lung is able to exchange. So what happens is, as a compensatory mechanism, the neonate or the child is having more number of breaths per minute. So it is because of less surface area of lung. Now you must be wondering, then why in elderly it is decreasing? It is because in elderly also the lung is matured, lung is big size only, same as adult, but the reason over here is the weakness of the muscles that arise with age. Weakness of respiratory muscles due to age. Okay. So now, secondly, we are going to talk about the structures involved in the process of respiratory movements. Remember, I am already talking about the respiratory movements. So we have two types of structures involved. First one being the respiratory passage. Respiratory passage is actually your lungs, alveoli, bronchi, etc. The second one is your chest wall with diaphragm. So chest wall includes your muscles, joints, sternum, vertebra. Now firstly we will be talking about muscles, then about the joints in detail. So we'll make a very small and short table in which I will include all the muscles that we're going to talk about in short only. So, inspiration, expiration, thereof inspiration is classified into 3 types: quiet, deep, and forced. Remember that expiration was a passive process, so no muscles are involved in quiet and deep expiration. Okay, so directly we'll come to the point of muscles involved in quiet inspirations. We have only 2 muscles involved over here. I'm using red because muscles are red in color. So you have your diaphragm and external intercostal. Okay, how are they working? We'll talk about it in detail. In deep, apart from these two will be present. So I would rather write 1 plus 2. Along with that, you will have sternocleidomastoid, scalene, and serratus posterior superior. Now, the function of the sternocleidomastoid is to raise the ribs. Function of the scalene is again to raise the first and the second rib. Scalene is anterior, medius, and posterior. Anterior and medius raises the first rib. The posterior raises the second rib. Now, what is the function of serratus posterior superior? That we'll talk about when we'll talk about this in detail. Now, muscles involved in forced inspiration are all these muscles, and that is 1 to 5 the following. So over here we need to firstly fix the scapula. So what all will fix the scapula is your traps, rhomboids, both the rhomboids, major and minor. For fixing it, the third one is levator scapulae. These 3 are going to fix the scapula, and then the ribs are going to be raised with the help of certain other muscles. That is again scalene, SCM, they're again playing role. The one new muscle that is going to play role over here is your pectoralis minor. Remember that it's minor, not a major. Major will only play a role if the person is pushing his arms, resting them against some surface, table or chair or anything else. Then only major will play a role, otherwise it's minor, or in Latin major or minor. Now coming on to the expiration, for forced expiration we have some muscles: quadratus lumborum, latissimus dorsi, then we have internal intercostals, transverse thoracis, and serratus posterior inferior. So quadratus lumborum, it basically holds the 11th and 12th rib. Latissimus dorsi pushes the posterior wall so that air can exit, and these 3 they lower the ribs. Okay, you will learn in few minutes that during inspiration ribs are raised, and during expiration ribs are lowered, like this, like this, like this, like this. So you can see from my elbows, when I'm raising the ribs, the diameter is increasing from this end to this end. Just notice it. But when I'm decreasing it, it's decreasing. So that will play a key role in understanding one movement. Now I'll talk about the joints involved. So joints involved are costovertebral, costotransverse. Costovertebral is a plain synovial type of the joint. Costotransverse is very important because the joint formed by 1 to 6 rib with transverse process of thoracic vertebra provides rotatory movements. Why? because the articulating aspect of these ribs is concave, whereas articulating aspect of the transverse process of the thoracic vertebra is convex. So it fits into each other like this. Whereas if I talk about ribs 7 to 10 with transverse process of thoracic vertebra, again the same story. Over here both of them are flat, so they provide gliding movement. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the proper respiratory movements. So sorry, I forgot to mention about other joints. Manubriosternum, manubriosternal. It is basically joint between the manubrium process and the body of the sternum. This basically helps in the elevation of sternum. Then is your costochondral. No movement takes place at the costochondral joint. Sternal and vertebrosternal. So 6 joints are involved. Okay, so let's continue now. So we were at the joints. So the costosternal joint, it is basically a primary cartilaginous joint, and it basically stabilizes the shoulder and has no such role in respiration as such, but stabilizing the shoulder is very important for respiration directly. Okay, and now vertebrosternal, it is basically the initial vertebra that are directly connected with the sternum, the initial the true vertebrae that are known to be that are said with initial 1 to 7 vertebra. Vertebrosternal, costochondral joint, no movement as such. Okay, now we'll talk about the proper respiratory movements. Now for this you need to understand one thing, that this is your chest, thoracic cage. It has six sides: anterior, posterior, 2 laterals, superior and inferior. So thoracic cage can be expanded in all these directions when we need to expand it vertically, upwards and downwards, anterior, posteriorly and on side. So you can imagine that it is like a cube. Okay, so it is like a cube, and it can be extended upwards, downwards, left, right, anterior, posterior. Okay, so up, down, anterior, posterior, lateral. So then theoretically we can extend it in all these directions. But why do we need to extend it? The question arises. So for inspiration we need to inhale the oxygen. So oxygen is present in environment, and any gas has this property that it travels from high pressure to low pressure. So inside a thoracic cage we need to decrease the pressure. But how will we decrease this pressure? We can decrease this pressure by expanding the volume of the thoracic cage. And how will we increase the volume? By increasing these dimensions of thoracic cage. These are known as the vertical diameter, anterior posterior diameter and transverse diameter. So we'll talk about these diameters one by one. Firstly, I'll begin with vertical diameter. So this is your diaphragm. Okay, This is the diaphragm. Sorry, this is better. This is the central tendon, these are the domes. So firstly the central tendon will contract and then the domes. How and why? All of you must have noticed that when you are inspiring, usually the anterior abdominal wall, it tends to come out. Why is it happening? Because firstly this central tendon contracts and it pulls the diaphragm downwards. Now if it is pulling it downwards, there is an increase of pressure on the intra-abdominal organs. When there is increase of pressure in intra-abdominal organs, they push the anterior abdominal wall, which is muscular in nature, anteriorly, so that there is enough space for the abdominal organs. Like when there's a pressure from upwards, there is a pressure on abdominal organs. They need some space. They need a room. So anterior abdominal wall bulges forwards and it provides that room to these organs. Now, what happens is anterior abdominal wall can protrude anteriorly only up till certain level. When it has attained that level, next what will happen is the intra-abdominal organs will provide resistance to the diaphragm. Now when they are providing the resistance to the diaphragm, the central tendon of diaphragm can't contract any further and diaphragm can't depress any further. Now the domes of the diaphragm will begin to contract and move downward. But again, these domes also have a certain limitation. When they have contracted up to the maximum possible level, they will ask the ribs, now you elevate. So that will lead to when the ribs will elevate, that will lead to the next subtopic, that is the increase the transverse diameter. So now coming back to the vertical diameter. So this movement of this diaphragm can be compared with the movement of piston. Like all of you must have seen the piston moves up and down like this. It has a handle, it moves up and down, up and down. Same way the diaphragm is moving up and down. It moves down in inspiration and up in expiration. That is the elastic recoil. And that's why expiration is passive in nature. So this increase in vertical diameter is compared with piston movement. And yeah, one more thing, I said that we can expand this cube in all the 6 directions. So in vertical diameter, we are supposed to, or we can expand it upwards and downwards. But theoretically, it is possible to expand it upwards and downwards, but not practically. Why? Because superiorly, in the case of the vertical diameter, superiorly, we have a suprapleural membrane. That is nothing but a thickening of endothoracic fascia. So this is present between what? It is present between the thoracic cage and parietal pleura. All of you know that there are 2 pleuras. One is visceral and one is parietal. So this is present between the parietal pleura and the thoracic cage. So hence, this cube cannot expand upwards. So in order to increase the vertical diameter, this cube can only expand downwards. That is what I have explained over here with the help of the piston movement. It is known as piston movement, also piston handle movement in some cases, in some books. I hope this is clear. The piston movement is clear. Now I'll move on to the second aspect, that is the transverse diameter. So, in order to understand the transverse diameter, you need to take a bucket, the one that you use to take baths. The bucket has a handle. Okay. Now, I'll draw this bucket again, but this time without handle first. You need to understand the fact that when you need to lift the bucket, you pull this handle upwards from down to up. Like this is your bucket and this is your handle. You take this handle and lift it like this, like this, obviously, right? So you're increasing its diameter from this point till the tip of my pencil. when I'm lifting it is increasing its diameter. Look, now I'll just explain the same thing over here. You can also experiment this at your home and check that when you are lifting the handle, this diameter, it increases. That is distance between, if I draw the two parallels, distance between point A and the point B, and over here if I draw the two parallels again, distance between these 2 points, point A and the point B, if I take it as A and if I take it as B, or I should take it as rather X and Y. So you can easily understand that the Y is more than X, and that's what is a concept of increasing the transverse diameter, because our ribs are obliquely placed, just like the bucket, handle of the bucket. So the thing is, these are the ribs. The center point of the ribs is present inferiorly with respect to the two ends, just like the handle of the bucket. The center point of the ribs is present at lower level with respect to the two ends, and when you will lift it up, the diameter will increase, and that's how the thoracic cage will expand sideways. So the ribs are oblique and then they become horizontal. They cannot go up any further. So this bucket handle movement, this increases the transverse diameter. Now coming on to the anterior posterior diameter. For this anterior posterior diameter, you have to take the ribs as a lever that you used to study in physics, with its fulcrum at center, load as sternum, because ribs are anteriorly attached with sternum, and effort as the vertebrae, or you can also take it as the posterior arm. So over here you can easily see that the anterior arm is longer with respect to the posterior arm. So small amount of movement on the posterior arm will cause huge amount of movement on the anterior arm. That's the concept behind this. So what will happen is, when these ribs, they will basically, the costal cartilages of the upper ribs is directed upwards and anteriorly. So what happens is, now firstly, where is this fulcrum located? This fulcrum is present just lateral to the tubercle of ribs. That's why the posterior arm is shorter and anterior arm is longer. So upper ribs basically have, upper ribs I mean to say the rib 1 to 6, they have the costal cartilages directed upwards and anteriorly. So they are able to lift the sternum up. I'll draw more diagrams to explain this one. So all of you know that the thoracic vertebrae, they are kyphotic in nature. Lumbar vertebrae are lordotic in nature. Kyphotic means they are having the curvature posteriorly. Okay, and lordotic means they are having the curvature anteriorly. So this is your rib and this is your sternum. So now when there will, what will happen is, these ribs, they will act as a lever and will lift the sternum up by getting straightened, because their costal cartilages are directed upwards and anteriorly. So you can again see that the Y is more than X over here. Okay, so this movement, so your sternum will bulge in front, like this is a human being. So this is a sternum, normally it will bulge in front. So you're seeing it from the side. If we are looking from the forward, it will come forward like this. So this increase is what is the increase in the anterior posterior diameter taking place. So this movement is compared with the movement of pump handle, the hand pump that you see in villages. Why? Just look over here. So the handle of the hand pump is getting lifted up. This was original, or you can just take it as this length as x, as this length as y. Again, y is more than x, hence there is increase in anterior posterior diameter. That's why this anterior posterior diameter increase is also known as pump handle. The first one was piston, second one was bucket handle, third is pump handle movement. So this covers the core concept of this chapter. Yes, this covers the core concept of this chapter. So now we are going to talk about the deep inspiration. Just hold on, there are some troubles. Yep. Deep inspiration. So deep inspiration is basically something when you are going to get a chest X-ray done, and the radiographer, he asks you to breathe in and hold. That is like deep breath holding that you are doing. So that is something that you do, that is the thing that known as deep inspiration, what you're doing at that time. So for deep inspiration, you need certain extra muscles apart from diaphragm and externocostal. Those are the two main muscles. Apart from that, you need sternocleidomastoid, scalenes, and serratus posterior superior. These three are basically mandatory for the deep inspiration. These are the accessory muscles of respiration, and they help in the elevation of ribs. Now we'll talk about forced inspiration. Forced inspiration is something in which you are breathing, like you are able to inspire but you are trying to take more of it. That is basically required after some physical activity or something. So in forced inspiration, the muscles that are being used for deep inspiration, 1, 2, 3 plus external intercostal and diaphragm. Apart from that, firstly you need to fix the scapula. Fixation of scapula. And for fixation of scapula, you need certain muscles, that is the traps, rhomboid, and levator scapulae. Then you need certain more muscles to elevate the ribs. These will fix the scapula, raise the scapula, fix the scapula. But you need certain more muscles to elevate the ribs further. These are again the ones that were used for deep inspiration, for quiet inspiration. Apart from that, you have another one, that is serratus anterior over here. That is the main one, that is the main additional that you need over here. And now we need to talk about expiration. Expiration, I said it's a passive process, correct. Why it is passive? Because of elastic recoil of lungs and relaxation of diaphragm, external intercostal. These are the ones that are used for quiet inspiration. And in the case of deep expiration, in the case of expiration after deep inspiration, that is deep expiration, for that again the reason is the same, elastic recoils of the lung and relaxation of all those 5 muscles. But for forced expiration, forced expiration is basically required for the patients with COPD. COPD, like asthma and all, basically these patients are having problems with the expiration. They are not able to expire. There is entrapment of CO2, so they need extra force, extra effort to expire. So certain muscles come and play the role over here. Over here you have carotid lumborum, that is attached to the 11th and the 12th rib. It basically holds these two ribs because these are floating ribs. You have latissimus dorsi. This one is basically the one that is pressing your back, your like the posterior aspect forward in order to contract the lungs. Then there are certain other muscles like transverse thoracis, internal intercostals, and one more. Let's just come back and see which one was that. Serratus posterior inferior, serratus posterior inferior. So these will lower the ribs. So like in inspiration, like imagine that bucket handle thing. Just look at that bucket handle thing. Yep. So in inspiration this was going up, and in expiration again it will come down. So when it will come down, so the ribs are coming down, that is done by these three muscles. Now we need to look at the changes in respiratory passage. Remember that there were two components, respiratory passage and the chest wall with diaphragm. The chest wall with diaphragm has been discussed. Now changes in respiratory passage. It is very small, respiratory passage one. Respiratory massage I was writing. So it is very logical if you have understood till now. If not, then it will be difficult. So when the chest is expanding, the lungs are going down, diaphragm is going down, lungs are going down. So lungs will go down, so your tracheal bifurcation will go down, your root of lung will go down, and when the air is entering, the bronchi will dilate, alveoli will dilate. That's all. These are the main changes. So first one, descent of tracheal bifurcation. It usually goes down from T4 to T6. Second one is descent of root of lung. Third is dilation of bronchi. Fourth is dilation of alveoli. Now in expiration, exact opposite, ascent, ascent, contraction, contraction. That's it. Exact opposite, simple. Now coming on to the clinical aspects. The first one is the postural change in diaphragm. So diaphragm has three different positions, like when we are sitting, standing, and lying down supine, and lying down recumbent. Recumbent is a separate case, we'll talk about it separately, but firstly let's talk about the three main: standing, sitting, and lying. So this is your wall. Firstly, in lying, it is at the highest position. In standing, it is at the lowest position. And in sitting, it's the intermediate position. So maximum chest expansion is taking place while sitting. That's why asthmatic patients, when they have an asthmatic attack, they sit and inspire. That is also a separate clinical scenario. We'll talk about it in a bit. In lying, it is the highest position, so minimum chest expansion. And in standing, it's the intermediate. Now coming on to the main thing that is important with this topic is lateral recumbent position. So the concept over here is, like the patient is lying, this is the bed, okay, So this is the head end. Okay, so you can see, so the diaphragm on the dependent side will be at a higher level with respect to the side that is not dependent. So the concept in this case is that the side of the diaphragm that is at a higher level will, like, diaphragm needs to reach this level. Okay, on both the sides will reach this level. The diaphragm on the higher side will travel more, on the lower side will obviously travel less. Hence, since it will travel more amount of chest expansion will take place on the dependent side. More amount of work will be done by the lung on the dependent side. Okay, so over here you need to know the fact that more work done by lung on dependent side. Hence, you need to understand a concept for the lungs. If lungs are injured or any kind of pathology is there, and we need to treat the lungs, we need lungs to heal. Like in COVID also, we need the lungs to heal. Why are we putting the patients on ventilator in the case of the COVID? Elective ventilation. Why? Because we need lungs to rest. If the lungs will rest, they will heal by itself. If they will not rest, they will not heal. So the concept over here is, if the patient is having some if the patient is a case of post-operative chest, a post-operative thoracotomy has been done for some lung or anything, or if the patient is having diseased lung one side, so we ask the patient not to lay down on that very side. So if the person is having pathology on the right side, the person will on the right side will become dependent. More work will be done by the lung on the right side, and hence it will not be able to relax, it will not get healed. So in order for the lung to heal, we need it to rest. Hence, we will ask the patient to lay down on the opposite side. Okay, so do not lay down with diseased lung on same side. Easy peasy. First clinical done. Second is volume expansion. Well, you might be wondering why I'm looking at the left side. I'm just watching a cricket match. There's a cricket match going on in the World Cup T20, so I'm watching that side by side. That's why I'm looking again on the left hand side again and again. Okay, so volume expansion. So diaphragm is going down. Okay, like from here A to B, it is going from A to B. It is going down 1.5 centimeters. And all of you know that tidal volume is 500 ml or cc. Out of this 500 cc, 400 cc of inspiration is just because of this 1.5 centimeter. That is just because of this 1.5 centimeter descent of the diaphragm. Diaphragm is the most important muscle for inspiration, for expiration. Rest 100 ml is by the anterior posterior and transverse diameter expansions that are taking place. Now, anterior posterior, when you inspire, anterior posterior also chest is expanding. So what is happening in this case is that there is increase of circumference. How much? In the case of the forced, 3 to 5 centimeter, average being the 3.5 centimeter. Okay, these are the values that usually they measure during the selection of the army. Coming on to the third clinical, that is about the COPD or the obstructive lung diseases. So again, I told you that these patients with COPD have a problem expiration. They need extra muscles for expiration. When the person having an asthmatic attack, they sit like this. They sit because the diaphragm is at the lowest position while sitting, and they sit like this. Why? With the help of their limbs, they are raising the shoulders and fixing the scapulas. That will help in the forced expiration. Okay, so COPD attack, person is sitting with upper limb resting against chair or table. Okay, next clinical is restrictive lung diseases. Restrictive lung diseases are basically concerned with the the pathology that is related in with the lungs, not with the chest wall as such. So twisting lung diseases don't have such much effect on the chest wall movement. Okay. Next is congenital chest wall defects. Pectus excavatum. Okay, pectus excavatum, you might be wondering, it is excavatum, that it is coming out, right? It looks like that it is coming out, but no, it is concavity of the chest. Second is pectus carcinatum, that is pigeon chest. In mid, chest is coming out, protruding, sternum is protruding out, sternum is protruding in. In both the cases, there will be a problem with the anterior posterior diameter. Abnormal movements of the chest wall will take place, and there will not be the adequate expansion of the chest wall that is required for inspiration. So these patients will complain of shortness of breath. The other chest wall defects are kyphosis and rickets. These also, anterior posterior and transverse diameter will get affected, and hence patient inadequate inspiration and shortness of breath. Now let me see what all clinicals are left. Just one is left, that is nerve injuries. Basically, you can understand the fact that diaphragm is supplied to the phrenic nerve. Phrenic nerve is coming from C3, 4 and 5, and various other nerves are also coming, various nerves to the accessory muscles are also coming from the cervical plexus only, mainly, like direct march, latissimus dorsi, direct to the scale and eye. So in the all these are mainly present in the posterior triangle of the neck, that is bounded between SCM and the trapezius. You can check out my other video for the posterior triangle of the neck, that for better understanding. So any injury in the neck, posterior triangle mainly, will lead to the damage of the nerve. Injury in posterior triangle, nerve damage. Okay, phrenic nerve or accessory nerve gets damaged, paralysis of diaphragm or any other major muscle of respiration, and what will happen? Khatam, matlab khel khatam, death. Exactly. That's all for the respiratory movements from my side. I hope you enjoyed this short video. And for look, you can reach me on my Insta, my main Insta, and my Insta dedicated to the anatomy videos. I hope you are enjoying it. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe.